Hi there and welcome to Power Play. I'm Vashi Capellos on this Tuesday in Ottawa. Tonight, Prime Minister Carney delivers a eulogy for the way things used to be pre-Trump.
We know the old order is not coming back. We shouldn't mourn it. Nostalgia is not a strategy. But we believe that from the fracture, we can build something bigger.
The Prime Minister pronounces the end of the world as we've all known it in a World Economic Forum speech, outlining his vision for Canada's new place in the world, rocked by U.S. President Donald Trump, without naming the president himself. We're going to take you to Davos in moments for reaction. Then, Donald Trump's Arctic ambitions.
How far are you willing to go to acquire Greenland?
You'll find out.
Allies on edge as President Trump doubles down, demanding American control of the Danish territory, Greenland. Former U.S. Secretary of Defense Leon Panetta will be here to talk about that coming up. Plus, we've got our front bench lined up to unpack the strategy behind the Prime Minister's provocative Davos speech and Trump's response that you just heard there on Greenland. Dan Wolton, Shakir Chambers, Kathleen Monk, and Laura Stone are all standing by. That'll be a little bit later on in this show. First, though.
Great powers have begun using economic integration as weapons. Tariffs as leverage, financial infrastructure as coercion, supply chains as vulnerabilities to be exploited. You cannot live within the lie of mutual benefit through integration when integration becomes the source of your subordination. We know the old order is not coming back. We shouldn't mourn it. Nostalgia is not a strategy. But we believe that from the fracture, we can build something bigger, better, stronger, more just. This is the task of the middle powers. The countries that have the most to lose from a world of fortresses and a most to gain from genuine cooperation.
Let's start tonight with one of the most significant speeches from Prime Minister Mark Carney since he assumed office. From the World Economic Forum in Davos, Switzerland, and without naming President Donald Trump, Carney clearly enunciated how he sees the world with Trump in it, eulogizing the death of what was and predicting the dawn of a brutal reality where even the existence of rules is supplanted by great power politics. For a country like ours, still so deeply intertwined with the United States, the ramifications of that framing will not be insignificant. CTV's Annie Bergeron-Oliver is covering the Prime Minister's trip from Davos and has more on that speech. Annie?
Vashi, the Prime Minister's speech was frank, saying the old world order is dead and that the path forward requires middle powers like Canada to work together to push back against and call out great powers that he said would help hedge uncertainty and create a new world order based on shared values. Now, many of the elements in his speech we've heard before, like the need to diversify trade access and reaffirm partnerships with like-minded allies. He also talked about the need to move away from Canada's reliance on the United States. But what this speech really did was pull everything together and chart a new path forward for Canadian foreign policy. Now, Carney made one brief reference to American hegemony, but he never actually called out Donald Trump by name. Still, the message was clear. He talked about great powers using tariffs as leverage, think Greenland, and supply chain vulnerabilities to be exploited, think steel and aluminum tariffs. Now, this isn't totally surprising given that Carney in the past has been hesitant to call out Donald Trump directly. Now, in the address, Carney also talked about the issue of the day, Greenland, saying he is opposed to the proposed tariffs. He also said that Canada supports Article 5, the principle that an attack on one is an attack on all, and he said that is unwavering. Now, that got a round of applause, and the speech itself, Vashi, got what organizers called a rare standing ovation. Now, the Prime Minister may get the chance to raise his concerns directly to the U.S. President tomorrow. Right now, the two are not scheduled for a meeting, but of course, anything can change here at Davos, and the two do have some time on Wednesday when they overlap at the World Economic Forum. Vashi?
All right, thanks so much, Annie. That's Annie Bergeron-Oliver reporting for us from Switzerland. As you heard her say, Donald Trump's growing demands for control of Greenland appear to be overshadowing the summit itself in Switzerland. The president taking questions at the White House ahead of traveling to join world leaders in Davos. Have a listen.
How far are you willing to go to acquire Greenland?
You'll find out. We have a lot of meetings scheduled on Greenland. I'm leaving tonight, as you know, for Davos. And we have a lot of meetings scheduled on Greenland. And I think things are going to work out pretty well.
But Greenlanders have made it clear they don't want to be part of the U.S.
Well,
what gives the U.S. the right to take away that self-determination?
When I speak to them, I'm sure they'll be thrilled.
The president was also asked if he's committed to keep the United States in NATO.
I've had such a good relationship. I've made it so much better, so much stronger. It's so good now. NATO is so much stronger now. I don't agree with a lot of the things they've done, but that was done before I got there. I think NATO's been good. Sometimes it's overrated, sometimes it's not. But we have a strong NATO. When I came here, we had a weak NATO. We had a NATO at 2%, and they weren't paying. You had a nothing NATO. NATO's, whether you like it or not, it's only as good as we are. If NATO doesn't have us, NATO is not very strong.
With us now to talk about all of that, former director of the CIA, and former Secretary of Defense, Leon Panetta. Hi, Secretary Panetta. A pleasure to welcome you back to our program. Thank you very much for making the time.
Good to be with you.
I have to start off on the latest comments from the president where Greenland is concerned. He was asked in a press conference today how far he's willing to go to, quote, acquire Greenland. He replied, "You will find out." What do you take from that?
Well, it's obvious that the president is trying to bully his way into taking over Greenland. And the problem with that is that when others decide to stand up to him, it's going to make it very difficult for him to continue to try to threaten others with tariffs or military action or whatever. So I think this is not a good tactic for the president of the United States to use if he wants to get something done when it comes to national security.
Do you anticipate, if he continues to employ this kind of rhetoric, that NATO allies, including Canada, including much of Europe, will stand up to him? Certainly, I would denote, compared to other issues, they have taken a much harder line against the president.
Yeah, I don't think there's any question that the European countries are unified in standing up to President Trump. If necessary, they'll get into a tariff war, which could hurt the economy here in this country and certainly increase the affordability problem. So I'm not sure that the president really wants to create that kind of economic problem as we go into an election year. But we'll see. I think the most important thing is that Europe has every right to stand up together in opposition to what the president is trying to do in Greenland.
Do you think that that is a smart course of action on the part of NATO allies? And do you think it will ultimately result in disincentivizing Trump to do whatever he is thinking about doing? Like, ultimately, do you think it will work if they stand up to him?
Yeah, no, I don't think there's any question that, when bullies threaten others, if you stand up to bullies, they usually back off. And I think this is that kind of situation. If Europe is unified, if they threaten to take action with regards to a tariff war with the United States that could damage our economy, I just do not believe that the president wants to go through that kind of conflict, particularly as we go into an election year.
What do you think more largely, the fact that this is even a conversation that we're having about one, NATO ally versus another, means for the alliance itself, as someone who, spent a lot of time representing the United States there?
Well, I happen to believe that that one of the most important alliances that the United States has is with NATO. It was created after World War II. It was critical to stopping the Soviet Union. It has been a critical alliance for countries that have been willing to stand up to Russia, particularly in Ukraine. I think NATO is a very important alliance. And the last thing the United States should be doing is taking any kind of action that could undermine NATO. That'll only hurt the United States, and it'll hurt the cause for protecting our national security.
As you look at the state of NATO right now, do you believe it can withstand all of this pressure from the United States? Like, is it strong enough to?
No, I think people are beginning to understand how you deal with President Trump, and the only way you deal with him is when he bullies you, when he threatens you. You have to stand up to them, and you have to make clear that you're not going to back away. And that's what Europe's doing. That's what NATO's doing, and I think it's the right tactic in terms of making clear to President Trump that rather than bullying, he ought to be negotiating to try to develop a common approach to protecting national security.
I know world leaders are all descending on Davos right now, and our Prime Minister here in Canada is among them. He delivered a speech today in which he essentially eulogized the pre-Trump rules-based world order. And I'm wondering, from your perspective, as someone who was at the highest levels of the U.S. government and now sort of sees the position of the U.S. in the world and the positions that Donald Trump has taken, if you think this is, a rupture, something that will not change or go back, we will not go back from, or whether you think this is less permanent.
Oh, I don't think there's any question that that this is something that is a temporary disruption because of how President Trump is behaving. But in the end, I think this president understands that the last thing he needs is to undermine NATO. The last thing he needs is to engage in a tariff war with Europe. The last thing he needs is to basically help Russia and China, who really do want to break up the relationship between the United States and our European allies. I think in the end, he'll pound his shoe on the table, but the end result is going to be that he cannot continue to bully the rest of the world and be successful.
And yet he does continue to do so. Can you blame countries like Canada, who sort of feel like they have to view it as more permanent than perhaps a lot of Americans would like to see it?
Yeah, no, I understand. If I were in Canada's shoes, I would take a position that makes clear that we have to stand up, and we cannot just simply collapse because the president is trying to bully his way to whatever goal he has in mind. So I commend Canada. I commend the European countries that are willing to unify and stand up and make clear that these kinds of bullying tactics are not going to succeed, period. It'll take a lot of work. It'll take a lot of effort. But in the end, I think it's the right path to take.
If you were here, how worried would you be as the president, posts a picture yesterday, for example, of Canada and Greenland with an American flag? Or we see reporting in this country that our military is thinking of various scenarios in which it might have to defend this country against some sort of intervention from the United States from a military perspective. I mean, it would be an absurd conversation for us to have when you were in office in your capacity as Secretary of Defense. How seriously should we be taking it right now?
Look, we live in a dangerous world. And the United States is facing threats from Russia, particularly in Ukraine, facing threats from China, facing threats from North Korea, facing threats from Iran, facing threats from terrorists. Those are the national security threats that we ought to be confronting. Rather than going after Canada, rather than going after Greenland, rather than trying to bully your way into gaining territory of one kind or another. That's just a huge waste of time when the rest of the world is a very dangerous place and needs, frankly, the United States to provide world leadership rather than what it's doing now.
And what's the greater impact of the fact that it isn't?
I think the impact is that it's hurting our credibility in the world. And that's not a good thing, because if the United States decides to go it alone, to be isolationist from the rest of the world, that'll only hurt our national security.
Okay, Secretary Panetta, I'll leave it on that note. Thank you for your insights this evening. I appreciate them very much.
You bet. Thank you.
Former U.S. Secretary of Defense there, Jan Panetta. We're going to dig into Prime Minister Mark Carney's speech with our front bench. That's a little bit later on in the show. Dan Moulton, Shakir Chambers, Kathleen Monk, and Laura Stone will all be here for that discussion. First, though, Canada traded Chinese electric vehicles for agricultural tariff relief, but only for a year. Agricultural Minister Heath MacDonald is just back from Beijing. He'll join us on the other end of a short break on Canada's new China strategy.
You've just been to the other great power, to China. What's the defense of what you're doing, and what do you hope to get out of it?
Well, the first thing is to say it's not a defense. It's an. I know the way you framed the question, but it's offense. It's building out within those clear guardrails are huge opportunities in energy, both clean and conventional. Obviously, in motor vehicles, in agriculture.
I mean, it's a Canadian agriculture industry. There's agriculture in Manitoba. There's agriculture in Ontario. The Atlantic premiers are happy that the tariffs are removed from seafoods too. So to say that this is favoring one province over another, that's just simply not a true statement, and it shouldn't be made. This is a decision that is in the best interest of Canada.
New comments from the Prime Minister and Saskatchewan's Premier as dust settles on last week's big reset with China. Canada allowing 49,000 Chinese electric vehicles in exchange for a big reduction in agricultural tariffs, something that's left Ontario Premier Doug Ford declaring an end to his partnership with the Prime Minister.
I always say collaboration, cooperation, partnership. It was anything but a partnership. I found out about this deal, and the auto companies found out, by the way, a few hours before it was announced. So much for the partnership.
And that tariff relief for Canada's agricultural sector is notably only for this year. Heath MacDonald was in China on that trip with the Prime Minister. He joins us now. Hi, Minister. It's great to meet you. Great pleasure to welcome you here to studio. Thank you for making the time.
Thank you, Vessi. It's nice to be here.
I want to start on the agricultural tariffs that were removed until the end of 2026, the Chinese tariffs, and in particular something that you told my colleague Judy in your press conference today, which is essentially that they are time limited because you said basically it was in the remissions relative to steel. Can you qualify that? Is it basically because we did not drop the Canadian tariffs on Chinese steel that there is a time limit to the relief from those agricultural tariffs?
No, I think, Vessi, look, I mean, there's lots of things left on the table that we have to negotiate with China, and, you know, that may be part of it, but there's other things as well. This all came together relatively quickly, and we were, you know, a little bit maybe overwhelmed to some extent on everything that happened. There's been a lot of negotiations, a lot of hard work, a lot of people putting a lot of effort into it. But I can tell you, even from the beef, which we really couldn't announce when we were in China, and it was coming back to Canada, that we just did it, I believe, yesterday. We've already seen action on some of these items. We've seen one importer from China importing, signing off on 60,000 tons of canola. We've seen a large exporter of beef going next week to China. We've seen approximately 20 establishments listed for export into China that are in Canada. So things happened really quickly, and it's something that you know, we've got more to do on this, but the door is open, and we need to exercise expediency as much as possible.
And I can certainly appreciate the success where beef is concerned. My question, though, Minister, with great respect, was around canola meal, lobsters, crabs, and peas, and the sort of initial incongruence of why we are going to allow 5 years of additional access from the EV market perspective for only 11 months of relief from tariff.
Well, I think the agreement when we left was to continue the collaboration and cooperation and the discussions. I think we had very genuine, down-to-earth discussions, even with President Xi when I was there with the Prime Minister. And look, I can tell you that the attitude in China, even from when I was there in the fall, with meeting Minister Su basically changed. And it was very interesting to see it because as soon as President Xi basically decided that this is the process and how we were going to go, the doors started open immediately for businesses here in Canada. So we're excited. Obviously, we're cautiously optimistic, but we maintain the cooperation and collaboration with these people. It's an extremely important market. It's the second largest economy in the world, and they're growing at a 5% rate annually. So we need to be there and be in the room for our sectors.
But what does that mean for those sectors that will only see relief through to the end of 2026? To be blunt, if it is even in part tied to the remaining tariffs on Chinese steel, does that mean that your government is open to removing those tariffs?
Well, again, the communication is going to be ongoing, and I think that time and time again people have asked that question, but it's like this is ongoing. This happened relatively quickly. I was just informed of the beef issue when I had a meeting with the minister in China. So this is how quickly this has evolved, and we'll have further negotiations and further communication at every level. And we're looking forward to it. And I can tell you, I met with 20 sectors about 2 hours ago from all across the country, representing every industry basically within the agriculture sector. And I can tell you that they're pretty excited about what we've seen so far.
And I can certainly understand why agricultural groups and that sector more largely would be excited. But I know you're also well aware that the EV sector is not excited, that the auto sector, the Premier of Ontario, is not excited. I can only imagine if your government were to remove tariffs on Chinese steel, that would greatly impact a sector that is already down and out thanks to the tariffs from the U.S. president, how much more of an impact that would have. Can you be clear? You said conversations are still ongoing, that you're open to discussions. Does that mean that your government is open to removing tariffs on Chinese steel? Because that is consequential to the sector domestically.
Look, hey, Vasi, look, I'm the Minister of Agriculture and Agri-Food. That might be a better question for Minister Jolie, but I can tell you
you sit around the cabinet table with great respect.
Well, we just arrived back on Saturday night, so this happened relatively quickly, and it's something that I think we can all take a little pride in, that we made these decisions, we acted as promptly as we could. This happened a lot quicker than even I think we anticipated. But I think the door, we were leaning on an open door, and I think the door opened when President Xi decided it was time to do more business with Canada. Look, I give a lot of credit to our Prime Minister. He's worked extremely hard on this. He's been very determined, to help, for example, canola, the $4 billion industry. I mean, that has a major effect, a trickle-down effect on our ecosystem of our economy, especially in the prairie provinces. So we're going to continue to maintain those conversations and the collaboration.
Do you believe, Minister, that should China be upset with something Canada does in the future, that it will not once again leverage the position it holds with the canola sector and once again apply tariffs just as it did back in 2018, just as it did last year? Like, is there anything to insulate Canada from that happening again, or is the door just so wide open from your perspective?
Look, the geopolitical landscape has changed dramatically over the past year, and it's really tough to determine what anybody's going to do in the future. In fact, what they're going to do tomorrow. So what we got to do is control what we can control, and if we can control, opening up markets and reestablishing markets in China, then that's what we need to do. Diversification is going to be extremely important for our ag sector and agri-food sector going forward, and what we're trying to do is fulfill that. So we need to act quickly, as they say, as the iron is hot, and strike. And we're trying to do that. Next week I'll be in Dubai. So the Prime Minister is obviously on the move. So he's making his way around the world and trying to create new deals for Canada. And that's what we're trying to do. I think it's important.
But what's the cost that your government is willing to bear on behalf of Canadians when it comes to China? China is a very specific actor in this world. 18 months ago, I was covering a Liberal government that had designed an entire Indo-Pacific policy aimed at countering China's ascent. You are now here today, and the Prime Minister saying to Canadians, things are different because of Donald Trump, so we've got to do what we've got to do. At what cost, though, if China is willing to display or sort of repeat the behavior that it already has when it comes to the agricultural sector and canola specifically?
Well, like I said, we don't know what they're going to do tomorrow or the next week or the following week, but any other country is very similar to that. So
to China? Any other country is similar to China?
Any other country can change their mind on any trade issues at any time. We've seen it. We've seen non-tariff barriers in the EU. So I think we need to accept the present and take them at their word, basically. Face-to-face meeting with the Prime Minister and President Xi went over very well. So we're going to continue to act. Fundamentally, we make decisions on our values each and every time we make a trade deal, and we'll continue to do that.
Is there not some, natural skepticism from Canadians when they hear from you that we should take, the Chinese Communist Party at its word, given all that we know about what it means to our own national security environment? The Prime Minister himself 7 months ago identified China as the biggest security threat to this country. All that we know about, how it props up Russia, what it does with Venezuela, what it does with Iran. Should we really be taking China at its word? Why do you feel that is okay to do?
Well, I think, we trade with many different countries around the world, and all those countries have different values from what Canadians have. And we have to judge ourselves on what's at stake and what's present to move this country forward. This is certainly plays a significant part in the economic driver of Canada, and we need to face value it and to take them at their word at the present time. That's really all you can do. I think it doesn't matter if you're in Dubai or if you're in somewhere in the United States or wherever. I mean, you need to continue pressing forward to grow Canada and to ensure that we do everything possible to be successful, sustainable, and prosperous.
Even if it makes us more vulnerable to a partner that has nefariously acted towards us from even just a simple economic perspective in the past?
Well, look, I think you have to take it at face value, and you have to ensure that you don't lose your values. I mean, we are full of integrity, Canadians, and I appreciate that. But we also need to continue to create the economic value that, say, canola has to this country, or lobster, or pulses. So I think it's important that we continue to, measure up each and every decision that we make on the trade front.
Okay, Minister, I will leave it on that note. I'm out of time. I appreciate your time very much. Thank you.
Thank you.
Heath MacDonald is Canada's Agriculture Minister. Coming up on Power Play, we're going to break down the political impact of Prime Minister Mark Carney's very significant speech in Davos, Switzerland. Our front bench is set to do just that. Dan Moulton, Shakir Chambers, Kathleen Monk, and Laura Stone. There they are. They're back with me in just 2 minutes.
I think we have trade like we've never had before. We're doing better in trade than we ever have before. We're not being ripped off by every country in the world like we were before. We're doing numbers that nobody's ever thought possible. We're the richest we ever were. It's because of tariffs and the proper use of tariffs, and we're also the most secure.
U.S. President Donald Trump takes a steamroller approach to foreign policy, ignoring global alliances and partnerships where they conflict with what he wants, an approach that prompted Prime Minister Mark Carney to declare the end of the old world order in a speech to the World Economic Forum in Davos. Have a listen.
Great powers can afford for now to go it alone. They have the market size, the military capacity, and the leverage to dictate terms. Middle powers do not. But when we only negotiate bilaterally with a hegemon, we negotiate from weakness. We accept what's offered. We compete with each other to be the most accommodating. This is not sovereignty. It's the performance of sovereignty while accepting subordination. We shouldn't allow the rise of hard power to blind us to the fact that the power of legitimacy, integrity, and rules will remain strong if we choose to wield them together.
Here to unpack the politics behind and the policy that could follow from the Prime Minister's pivotal speech is our front bench. Former senior advisor to the Liberal Ontario governments of Dalton McGuinty and Kathleen Wynne, Dan Moulton, is here. He's now a partner with Crestview Strategy. Shakir Chambers worked in Prime Minister Stephen Harper's office before becoming a policy advisor to the International Trade Minister. Kathleen Monk is former director of communications to the late Jack Layton. She's now the principal owner of Monk & Associates. And Laura Stone is a Queen's Park reporter for the Globe and Mail. Hi, everybody. Good to see you tonight. Kathleen, I'll start with you. This, to put it mildly, felt like more than just a speech. It certainly felt as significant as a speech I can remember from a prime minister in a long time. What's your big takeaway?
Yeah, so clear-eyed, so forceful, in many ways brave. I think the first thing that I'm taking away from is, as a lot of us on this panel have written speeches before, and to learn actually from reporting that Prime Minister Carney himself penned this, remarkable. And we're going to start hearing things. We saw headlines already, not just the New York Times, the regular BBC. We're seeing them in the Rolling Stone magazine, how Canada's PM has ripped Trump a new one. I was really taken aback that he used the venue of Davos to basically challenge leaders in the room. The middle powers had to stand up, band together in many ways to stand up to Trump. And I think right now I'm just kind of riveted thinking what's going to happen tomorrow when Trump shows up. I think it's 8:30 Eastern, sometime in the morning. There's going to be some kind of overlap with Carney. But it was a brave speech. It was, well crafted, so excellent to listen to. So many clips, like just the whole idea the old world order is over. It has been ruptured, which is something he said previously. We heard something similar like that in his election campaign. But to actually say that nostalgia is not a strategy, that we need to wake up and realize what we're dealing with, and we need, as middle powers, to really forcefully react to the basically coercive tactics that Donald Trump has been using against us. And not just the U.S., I should say. He was really speaking to all of these, the large powers, China, Russia as well, saying that they all have been trying to coerce us. And now we really need, as middle powers, to stand up to that. And with the brinkmanship around Greenland, it's just such a tense moment.
Yeah, in the context of the United States, the question that I kept thinking, Dan, was why now, right? Because it's probably the clearest enunciation of the world as the rest of the world sees it, with Trump in it, but from a world leader who arguably has the most to lose, given how intertwined our two countries remain and how much hinges on these renegotiations this year. So far, how many panels have we done where the conversation is like, oh, this isn't really as elbows up as it was during the campaign? This felt more elbows up.
Absolutely. I think this was Mark Carney at his best, and I think it's why he has risen so astronomically in Canadian politics over the course of the last year. Not because Canadians voted for a prime minister to make great foreign policy speeches or even to articulate Canada's place in a new multilateralist framework. It's because he speaks and delivers like an adult in the room. And I think that's what we saw from him today. When we're seeing on the same day Donald Trump leaking these quite grotesque text messages he's getting from other world leaders sucking up to him, Mark Carney show up at Davos and deliver as clear-throated and articulate and direct an address as this speaks volumes to the kind of leadership that I think he is bringing and Canada can bring to the world, but also how he shows up as a leader. And I think that's what Canadians have seen from Mark Carney over the course of the last year, and it explains the political triumph that he has undertaken over the course of the last 12 months. It is about a different kind of leader, I think, that Canadians want right now. Someone with, we've talked about this a lot, someone with the kind of background and pedigree that he has, but also I think the ability to cut through and speak in these clear of terms is really compelling. I think political circles across the country today were a bit stunned at how direct this was, and I think people from all sides of the Canadian political spectrum are seeing what I hope and I believe what they want in a prime minister.
Yeah, I think rhetorically, exactly what Dan sort of laid out there has resonated and will continue to resonate with a lot of Canadians. I do, though, wonder about the reality of the situation, sort of in the way that I framed it to Dan, Shakir. When you think about, for example, if he is in a room with Donald Trump tomorrow, as these negotiations and the review of CUSMA proceed, it is one thing to say and articulate, as the Prime Minister did today, how I think much of the world feels. It's a different thing to then act on that, particularly when you depend on a country economically to the degree we still do.
Yeah, I mean, if they do have engagement, Trump and Carney tomorrow, we'll see how that plays out. But I took from this speech him trying to hedge against Donald Trump. So obviously it was a consequential speech. I mean, we're dealing with probably the most consequential president that I've seen in my lifetime. So it makes sense that Carney kind of met the moment with this speech. But I think outside of him just kind of like theorizing about, international relations and great powers and this and that, I took away a sales pitch for Canada. In certain parts of the speech, you heard him talk about, the stability Canada has, the free trade agreements he's able to sign, I think, over the last 6 months. We have things that the world wants around resources and critical minerals. I think it was really a continuation of what we've seen him do since he's taken office, whether that's going to Europe, going to the Middle East, going to Asia, just talking about Canada being a place that you want to invest. And I mean, we can say what we want to say about the Davos crowd, but those are folks with very deep pockets, people who make decisions, world leaders, and they can invest in Canada. And so I really took from Carney, from this speech, outside of, again, the great power rivalry stuff, more about continuing the theme of making sure people know that Canada is open for business. That being said, it is just a speech, right? There needs to be execution, there needs to be implementation, money needs to come into Canada. And so we'll see if, the things that Mark Carney said today, which sound great, we'll see if it actually leads to, investment coming into Canada, major projects being built, barriers being reduced, and Canada remaining a stable jurisdiction to attract investment.
Last word to you, Laura. What was your takeaway?
Well, look, I mean, clearly it was well received in the room. The speech was well received by members of the Canadian public, not everyone. I found it a little bit esoteric, right? I mean, this was, as Shakir notes, theoretical. Mr. Carney did not mention Trump by name, and of course you can read between the lines, but it wasn't a deeply personal speech against the president. And so I think that the prime minister still has the opportunity to kind of build that relationship with the United States, even as he's being sharply critical of some of President Trump's actions now, and clearly tried to band together with allies across the world, looking at what's happening in Greenland and some of the remarks that the president is making about Canada, for instance, on social media, whether it's a joke or not. Or I don't think we can think anything's in jest anymore when it comes to President Trump. For me, this looked like a bit of a post-Trump strategy. We saw, Prime Minister Carney in the election campaign talk about how he's the best person to take on Donald Trump and strike a deal. That hasn't happened, and maybe Canadians have watched that, and some are perhaps on the conservative side critical of the fact that the prime minister has not lived up to that, and perhaps others are looking at it and saying, how could we strike a deal with this person? Like, this is not a trustworthy actor. And so I think you have to take the speech in the context of the whole trip that the prime minister has undertaken, this massive worldwide trip that he's just gone on and that he continues on to China, and striking that deal, and Canada kind of forging its own path now. So this does seem to strike me as potentially kind of the new strategy that Canada is going to undertake, and potentially a new message that Prime Minister Carney might take to voters sooner rather than later, if we are going to potentially see an election campaign in the near future.
Okay, I got to take a quick commercial break. On the other end of that break, we're going to take a deeper dive into that China trip and some things we've heard from the agricultural minister on this program. We're back in a moment with our front bench. Welcome back to Power Play. Earlier on the show, I sat down with Agriculture Minister Heath MacDonald, just back from that trip to China, where Canada reached an agreement to allow 49,000 low-cost Chinese electric vehicles into the country in exchange for about a year of relief on agricultural tariffs. I asked the minister after earlier in a press conference he linked steel tariffs on Chinese steel, or tariffs rather on Chinese steel, to why those other tariff, or that other tariff relief, is time-stamped. I had asked him, is that really the truth? Like, is steel the reason that this stuff is only extended till the end of 2026? Here's what he said.
I mean, there's lots of things left on the table that we have to negotiate with China, and that may be part of it, but there's other things as well. This all came together relatively quickly, and we were, a little bit maybe overwhelmed to some extent on everything that happened. There's been a lot of negotiations, a lot of hard work, a lot of people putting a lot of effort into it. We've got more to do on this, but the door is open, and we need to exercise expediency as much as possible.
Our front bench is back to talk about that. Dan Moulton, Shakir Chambers, Kathleen Monk, and Laura Stone. Laura, I'll start with you because this whole thing has really led to a breakdown in the bromance between Ontario's premier and the Prime Minister. Yesterday, Doug Ford said that basically said the partnership was over. If steel is up for grabs in some capacity, what more do you think that will do to the Premier's position?
Likely won't go over well with Doug Ford. I mean, he's already clearly has kind of a chip on his shoulder, quite frankly, about how this deal played out. The fact that he believes he was out of the loop and cut out of the conversation, and that the Prime Minister did not dignify him even with a phone call or a heads up on a personal level. He was briefed by Minister LeBlanc and senior officials, but I think Premier Ford is feeling a bit wounded right now and feeling like his province is under attack, quite frankly, from China, and that Prime Minister Carney is sort of expediting that. I think this shows kind of the difficult situation that the Prime Minister is in, to put it mildly, of having to navigate all these different trading relationships because of the breakdown with the United States, having to forge a new partnership with China, a country that has kind of laid out the quid pro quos of its dealings with Canada, and the fact that it, in order to do certain things for this country, it wants certain things in return, and questions about the trustworthiness of that. So I think Premier Ford would have a lot to say about this, and he clearly wants to stand up for the industries of his particular province, and so I think Mr. Carney, when he meets with the premiers, the Prime Minister has his work cut out for himself in trying to make all these different varied regions of the country happy when they're all feeling slightly under attack and damaged. And I think he's going to have to try to play nice with the premier on this one.
To Laura's point, Shakir, it's a great example of rhetorical realpolitik and the reality of it, right? Like, I think we all understand the necessity of diversifying where we send our exports, but quid pro quo leads down some pretty interesting paths.
Yeah, no, I would say a few things. I think just if you're talking about trade diversification, which the Prime Minister says a lot, it's just impossible to ignore a market like China, right? The second largest economy, you got to figure out ways to grow your trade with them. There's obviously risks associated, but you got to figure out ways to grow your trade. I think just on the premiers, so it's clear that Mark Carney, when he's making an agreement, if he knows a province is going to be upset, he'll just ignore them until the agreement's going to be announced and give them a heads up an hour or two before. He did it with Premier Eby with the MOU with Alberta. He's done it here with Doug Ford. I think I just don't want to hear premiers say anything anymore about Team Canada, because it's very clear that Team Canada only exists when you get everything you want for your province. The second you have to give an inch or give a little bit, you get upset, you call the Prime Minister, say he doesn't know what he's doing. I just don't want to hear folks talk about this Team Canada brand anymore, because it's very clear to me that a lot of premiers, they really only care about what's in their province, and they're not worried about ensuring that other provinces can kind of flourish and eat as well. Because I think for Ontario, what we're giving up, listen, Ford has been a champion for the auto sector. I totally get it and I totally understand it. What we're giving up so that Saskatchewan and the elected provinces can flourish, I don't think it's that dramatic.
Bravo, Shakir.
That's a good realpolitik point from Shakir, Dan. Yeah.
Absolutely. I've never agreed with him more. That was excellent. I've been finding myself thinking a lot about this lately when it comes to Doug Ford's comments on the Crown Royal plan, right? I think, I can understand why he's been coming forward with this podium politics style that he's really great at, and I think connects with a lot of people. The problem is those jobs aren't moving to the States; they're moving to other provinces, or they're being reinforced in other provinces. And you've got the Premier of Manitoba and the Premier of Quebec, or the Finance Minister of Quebec, I should say, asking Doug Ford to knock it off and stop with this. It really makes you think, why have we been going down this internal trade barriers political conversation over the course of the last 12 months if this is how we're going to behave when times get tough and push comes to shove?
Kathleen?
Well, first of all, I love Shakira's tough love, but I'm going to be a bit softer and think that maybe Mr. Carney should think about bringing back some roses for Premier Ford when he comes home from that trip, because he certainly seems like a bit of a jilted lover right now, Premier Ford. No, but I think that it's interesting because I'm not sure if Ford, who is, as Dan said, so good at that podium politics and that rhetoric, is actually going to win on this one. I actually think because Canadian public sentiment has swung so greatly. You know, where we were 4 years ago, as we talked about on Question Period, we were so dead against China and the relationship there. And now we have swung our hatred full tilt back to the U.S. And I think that that's why Ford should kind of temper, as both Dan and Shakir have said, his kind of anger against, Team Canada at large. And it's going to be interesting because Laura points out, too, the premiers are all going to be in this town. They're all descending next week for potentially the first face-to-face First Ministers meeting that they've had in a really long time. And so that will be interesting how he tries to woo them there.
Yeah, it definitely feels different than that other one in Saskatoon, which was like a very big love-in. Team Canada, Shakir points out, feels a little different this time around. We'll be there covering it, of course. Thanks, guys. I appreciate the discussion tonight. Our front bench with Dan Moulton, Shakir Chambers, Kathleen Monk, and Laura Stone. We'll take a quick break. We've got more ahead on Power Play. Welcome back to Power Play, and our takeaway today very much around our top story, that speech delivered by Prime Minister Mark Carney in Davos, Switzerland at the World Economic Forum. That speech was delivered against the backdrop of some pretty punctuated threats from U.S. President Donald Trump toward Greenland and the prospect of acquiring Greenland, not ruling out, for example, military force. And then a map that he posted on social media overnight that showed Canada subsumed by an American flag. There's new reporting out this morning that the Canadian military is envisioning various scenarios in which they could contend with some kind of military intervention from the United States. That reporting, the content of it, put to Anita Anand, our country's foreign affairs minister, who is also in Davos. Here's what she had to say in response to those questions.
Is the Canadian government, is the Canadian military looking at scenarios to defend Canada in the event of an American attack?
The work that we are doing in terms of foreign affairs is to grow the Canadian Armed Forces, to invest significantly in the Canadian Armed Forces, and to always ensure that the defense and protection of our country is first and foremost on top of our list of priorities. In terms of CAF planning, those are questions for the Chief of Defense Staff, and I refer you to them.
The Foreign Affairs Minister, Anita Anand, coming to us there from Davos, Switzerland, the World Economic Forum. U.S. President Donald Trump is scheduled to be there as well tomorrow. He's talking about something called the Board of Peace, designed to focus on issues of discontent in the world. A lot of controversy about who will or who won't be on that so-called Board of Peace. There's an event scheduled in Davos for that tomorrow. The Prime Minister had initially been considering an invitation, but then a price tag was attached to it of $1 billion. Today, the Finance Minister in Davos said that the Prime Minister would not be paying that fee, but ultimately a final decision on joining the event and the board has not yet been made. I'll leave Power Play there. Thanks for watching. Have a great night.